Every school community contains a diverse range of individual students, staff and families. So by acknowledging and encouraging this diversity, we strengthen the community and improve the mental health, well-being and productivity of all members. So in this session, we'll be laying a foundation of our core terminology and principles for the conversation about building a learning community that acknowledges and encourages diversity. We're going to be exploring the role of partnerships in acknowledging and encouraging diversity. We're also going to be exploring the challenges to inclusion of diversity and hear how one school has turned some of these challenges into opportunities. Good afternoon to you all. I'm Yasmin Knight. I'm one of the BU Education Consultants for the Victorian team. I have been with Headspace Schools for the last 3 years. I'm a qualified social worker and I've worked within child protection, youth justice and restorative justice systems within the children's courts in Victoria, as well as working within the school settings. I'm going to hand you over to one of my colleagues who's also going to be sharing this segment with us, Hannah. Thank you, Hannah.
Hi everybody, my name's Hannah Jamieson and I'm one of the National Education Advisors in the BU Headspace Schools team. Thank you so much for coming along. I've previously been a secondary school teacher for 15 years and I really appreciate the time that all teachers have taken out of their busy days and their busy weeks to be part of this, so thank you.
I'd like to do our Acknowledgement of Country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet here today. We pay our respects to the elders past and present, and as an initiative with national reach, we extend our respect to all elders and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples across Australia. So today we have lots of you, people like you, joining us from all over the country, and it'd be wonderful if you could share your own acknowledgement by putting the name of the traditional custodians of the country that you're on in our chat box. Also at BU, we endeavour to be embedded, incorporate, include and honour Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective ways in all of our work. So always BU symbols that you see on this slide here were developed to represent the ways of knowing, doing and being that we consider to be an important part in our work to support the mental health and well-being of children. So again, the symbols that you're seeing on this slide, they are for our yarn and do different ways. They're to represent our conversations today about embracing diversity.
On the screen at the moment, you'll see the support numbers for a number of mental health services and supports. Today's topic isn't going to cover too many upsetting ideas or topics, but however, it's really good to give you just a bit of a heads up to remind you about self-care. It's really important to look after yourself, and we encourage you to be mindful of these support services if you do need to speak to somebody about how you're feeling. You'll also see on this slide here the Always BU symbol for safe space. I really encourage you to see this as a safe space, to feel free to put into the chat any ideas that you have, but just to be mindful around confidentiality and not to identify any students in particular. So, what are we going to cover today? We're going to discuss the principles for embracing diversity in learning communities. Yasmin and myself are really excited to have here Daniel Riley from Dandenong Primary School to hear more about on-the-ground embrace diversity and inclusion, understand why partnerships are so vital in supporting diversity, and really getting to unpack some of the challenges and also the opportunities around supporting inclusion and diversity.
So let's have a look at celebrating and diversity and inclusion. So diversity, what makes us unique? Those differences could include ethnicity, gender, age, race, religion, sexual orientation. It can also include educational level, abilities, mental health status and physical attributes. So recognising the cultural diversity of school communities helps to meet the educational and welfare needs of students and their families. It also aids in planning of teaching and learning activities. So inclusion is also about removing barriers to ensure that everyone can fully participate and have equal access to opportunities. So by making efforts to make more inclusiveness, we show that we value diversity of our community and that our community is a safe place to be in. Inclusion can also help personal development, improve social skills. It builds self-esteem, self-confidence, and it also develops teamwork and supports independence for all young people and children. So not only can inclusion activities help children and young people, but they also benefit families. A question that I really would like to leave with you in regards to celebrating diversity and inclusion is, what does this mean for you in your teaching practices, in your classrooms? So you might be doing this already, and perhaps one of the most powerful activities that you could be using in your classrooms right now is, getting your students to draw a visual representation of their families. And this just gives you a great insight into diversity of family structures.
You'll see here the United Nations Rights of the Child, or some of them here. This was ratified in 1989, and I think it's a really good way to start with the why. Why is diversity and inclusion so very important? The United Nations has said that childhood is a time that deserves special assistance and care, because our young people have so much potential but do need our support. The rights of the child include the need to challenge discrimination when we see it, that it's about including the diverse needs of children, and that's in their best interests, that a child's development must include a safe place for them to be themselves and with all of their experiences and their difference, and that also it is incredibly powerful when learning communities consider the voice of the child. And later on we'll talk about some of the aspects of the BU initiative and about where you can learn more about including the voice of the child. So what does inclusion look like in a learning community? So it's about knowing who our young people are, who their parents, carers are, and what their stories are. It's about showing young people that they matter and their self-image is valued. It's about encouraging young people to share their voice, to speak up. It's about challenging prejudice, assumptions, generalisations, and discriminatory comments. It's about looking at the physical environment of the learning community. How does it cater to different abilities of disabilities and needs? As we all know, connection is key. So forming that genuine, equal and respectful connection with young people and their families is vital. It's about making sure that learning communities, your policies are up to date, and that inclusive policies are also core to this. It's about recognising and removing barriers to participation by young people and families. And I really just want to finish off on a couple of quotes that I love Brené Brown. She states in some of her diversity research that she's done, she states that we must be guardians of spaces that allow students to breathe, to be curious, and to explore. And the other quote that I really love also, she says, we should never underestimate the benefits to a child of having a place to belong, even one, where they can take off their armour, and it can often change the path of their life. I want to move on to the next part of our segment, and I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to introduce you to Daniel Riley. Now, Daniel Riley has worked in schools in Hampton Park, Frankston North and Scotland before his current principal role at Dandenong Primary School. He holds a bachelor and master's degree in education and is passionate about equity, excellence in achievement outcomes, and serves Australia's #1 most cultural diverse community in Dandenong. Now, hold your horses. Before we get to this next best part, we're going to show you a fantastic video from Dandenong Primary School, and this really does show us diversity in action.
The more we celebrate diversity, the more we learn, and then therefore other opportunities sort of come from that.
It's wonderful because everyone gets to join in and everyone is counted and everyone is equal and there's no one really left out.
I like that everyone's from different cultures, but I've never heard anyone say anything mean about someone else's culture.
When there are opportunities given for children to actually share through food or through conversations or through dress when we have those special days, it actually makes them have a better self-esteem and to say that I am different, but I'm proud of who I represent or the country that I represent, and that really uplifts them and they really feel that they are recognized and they actually have a place in our school.
From a mental health and mental well-being perspective, I think it's really important to feel like you belong.
A lot of the cultures, mental health isn't really talked about. It's kind of like hidden under the rug or it's frowned upon in a way. And I feel like us just being open to them and being very welcoming to them and giving them a platform for them to come and express themselves, any worries or any difficulties they're experiencing, I think that in itself speaks enough
when we reach a place where there's a lot of diversity in culture, we definitely feel happier in ourselves, you know.
We have parents from a whole range of cultures who come in and make use of things like English language classes we run. We have different sort of activity type groups, whether it be sort of sewing, or we have a really quite a big play group that takes place. And I guess these are sort of really structured programs, but the incidental sort of things that take place within those programs are really important for the parents here as far as building community and building friendships.
We discuss our ideas. We share our ideas with each other, and we don't hesitate to say something. If we have any issue, it's like home to us.
One of my favourite things that we do here is definitely Harmony Day. Harmony Day is a colourful sea of costumes from every culture, and just kids with these bright smiles on their faces walking around so proud to show off their cultures. And also we've looked a lot into Indigenous art as well, which is really important, so the kids know that, you know, living here, these are the roots that they're connecting to now.
The good thing is, on the open day, I saw my son's teacher that they say hello to the students in their own language.
I like to think that the children who are coming through this school will then accept that there's a whole range of cultures, a whole range of beliefs, and we can live together and function together and learn from each other and make life so much richer for that experience.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed that video. I know I've seen it several times and I just can't help myself just going back and looking at it over and over again. So as promised, we've got Daniel Riley here for you from Dandenong Primary School. And Daniel, thank you so much for being here with us today. Hannah and I are super excited that you're here. So first of all, let's kick off. Let's please tell us a bit about Dandenong Primary School.
Yeah, so by the way, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, so thank you for the invitation. I'm the principal of Dandenong Primary School, which is located in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. And at the last national census, Dandenong became known as Australia's #1 most culturally diverse community. So that was a time for us to celebrate because, we are a very diverse community, and to hold that title as Australia's #1, that's something that we cherish and absolutely celebrate. We have students and families from right across the world, incredibly diverse, and our staff too are just as almost equally diverse as the students and families that we serve. So a lot of our teachers speak a whole range of languages, from Dari to Sinhalese, Hindi, Sudanese, Arabic, Greek, Italian, etc., the whole host of languages. So it really is a really exciting place in which to learn and teach, and I've been there now for coming up to 5 years, and prior to there I was working in still a reasonably diverse community down in Frankston, but stepping into Dandenong, it's been a whole another world, and it's been absolutely amazing, and still been there for 5 years, but still learning each and every day in how we can best serve our culturally diverse community. So it really is a special place and an exciting place to learn and teach.
Wonderful, thank you. How did you gather information about culture and cultural resources in your community?
Yeah, I think one of the really important basic daily things I do is get out at the school gate and greet people in different languages. So I'll sort of say salam to a lot of our Afghan families as they come through the gate, and namaste for lots of our Hindu families, and I think that's a starting point, just reaching out and saying hello, learning to greet people in their home language. I think, or I like to think, it makes them feel welcomed into our school community, and often they'll greet me with a big smile when I greet them in the morning in their home language. So I think, that first port of call, just making that initial connection through greeting people in their home language, and which shows that you value, their community and their culture. So getting out to the school gate every morning is something I do, and also in the afternoons, waving people goodbye. I learned how to say goodbye, and I hope I get this right, in Dari just recently, which is Kodofis. So I say that to the families as they leave. leave as well, and sometimes if they're not familiar with me and I sort of come out and say that, I often get quite a big smile from the families, which is great. But I think any opportunity to gather information about the community we sort of seize, and I guess we do a lot of listening, and that's probably the short answer to how we gather information. We listen a lot to our families, and we provide opportunities for the families to come into the school and to let us know what's important to them, some of the challenges that they face, and just their experiences from where they've come from and to where they are now in the Dandenong community. We have a whole range of community service providers as well. Places like the City of Greater Dandenong Council has been quite amazing. We have the Southern Migrant Resource Centre for our refugees as well. And we also work pretty closely. We have what's called a community hub in our school, which is in partnership with Community Hubs Australia. And that's a real gathering place for our families, and we like to think that they feel quite welcome and safe in that space. And so we do a lot of information gathering through there, and some of it's formalised sort of information gathering like surveys and things like that. But a lot of it is just the incidental sort of listening along the way and learning. We have a lot of guest speakers that come through the community hub, and I guess when there's certain things happening around the larger community, like when it comes election time, we might invite someone from the Victorian or Australian Electoral Commission into the school with an interpreter or interpreters, and they'll talk and give information to our families through that, and that's another information gathering exercise as well, because then we sort of start to hear, well, what information do families need in order to participate fully in our community. So getting in those guest speakers and having translators available to help build the bridge between the school and the families we serve is really important. We have lots of community events across the school as well, and we've just had Harmony Day in the last week, and to us, given how diverse our community is, Harmony Day is our biggest celebration through the year. That's the big event for us. So we have a whole lot of children and families come in, and we all celebrate together, and that's another opportunity to hear from the families and listen and hopefully gather the information we need in order to serve them to the best of our abilities.
Some beautiful examples there. Thank you, Daniel. What have been some of the key challenges that you faced in promoting cultural inclusion?
Yeah, so I guess some of the key challenges, or one of the big ones, is I guess ensuring or making sure we're hearing as many voices as possible, or hearing all voices. Some families can be disconnected or isolated within the community, and we don't know what we don't know. So trying to figure out how to reach out to those families becomes a key challenge. A big key challenge is language barriers, but of course we make use of interpreters, and we're often on the telephone to the interpreter service for a sort of on-the-fly interpreting. But we've got staff in the school as well who we're calling on all the time to help us get around any language barriers. So that's really quite important. Another key challenge, I guess, is recognising that we may sort of bring unconscious biases to the work that we do. So being open to feedback and hearing what it is that we might be missing, or the biases that we might be taking into situations, that's a challenge as well. And then, of course, there's the competing forces of money and time. And if we had all the time in the world, we'd like to think we could do some amazing things with our community. But they're some of the key challenges.
Lovely, thank you. But by sounds of it, you've done an absolute wonderful job in getting through those key challenges, which can be quite daunting at times for a community, I'm sure. Yeah,
it can be, but I think we're very open to learning, and we're always learning together, and it's quite a dynamic community. It's pretty transient, so we've often got different groups coming in and out of the school. So we're always learning together. It never stops. And that's part of the fun.
Wonderful.
One of the challenges, Daniel, I'm wondering how 2020 was for you. Obviously, we're based in Victoria, where there was quite a lot of disruption, I suppose, to normal schooling. How was last year for you and the diverse community in Dandenong?
Yeah, well, it was incredibly challenging, as it was, I think, right across Victoria, especially, but of course across the world. So, you know, we have we had to support a lot of families through the provision of devices, so that when we moved into that period of remote and flexible learning, which for us was most of term 2 and then all of term 3, so we're talking nearly half the year. We had to supply around a third of our families with devices, so iPads and computers and internet dongles, so that they could access the learning and teaching that we were providing. You know, there was a whole lot of material aid that we supplied to families through that period too, so emergency food packages. We have sort of ongoing support from some agencies like One Box and Food Bank and the Smith family, and that became really critical as far as, you know, meeting the basic needs of our community as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a challenging time, but again, we learned so much together through that, and I think it's brought us all closer together, which holds us in really good stead for the future, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There was a lovely story, Daniel, if you don't mind me sharing, when I was speaking to you the other day around the toy library, and that one of the things, you came back to your point around we don't know what we don't know, was around how you can distribute toys from the toy library and also then help your parent and carer community around like safely sanitising and returning them. And that lovely story about a staff member, was it, or a parent who helped translate the cleaning instructions. I thought that was a wonderful example.
Yeah, so that was one of our parents. And again, that's another resource that we sort of tap into, of course, is our parents who do have the language skills to then help us build bridges with other families. But yeah, that was... the toy library work through through COVID was quite interesting. So we made sure we got as many resources from within the school out into the community, because they're no good sitting locked up in the school for half the year.
And I think that really speaks to the relationships, you know, and earlier, Yasmin, you mentioned partnerships that, you know, that parents know they can contribute to the safety and the learning of the whole community. I think that's so powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, pleasure.
I think perhaps you might have kind of answered my next question, Daniel, but the question was, how do you leverage some of these challenges into opportunities?
Yeah, well, again, I think it's doing whatever possible to engage with the community and find out what their needs and wants are, and receiving feedback around the work that we do and always striving to be improving on that. So yeah, just engaging with the community and trying to work out and learn together how to leverage some of those challenges into opportunities. Of course, there's lots of practical things like translation of materials as well. But yeah, I think, you know, when we meet challenges and when things come up, it's we're often learning together about the best way forward, and that comes through just engaging with the families.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And just to finish off, one more final question is, what's a piece of advice for schools that are starting their diversity journey? What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, so a couple of, I guess, really practical, easy things that you could do tomorrow, if you're not already, of course. But, you know, we do make a point of getting out to the gate every morning and greeting people face to face, farewelling them at the end of the day. That's just been really powerful in building that sense of welcome in the community, and hopefully a sense of the community being a safe place for people to be. I think finding any opportunity to celebrate cultural diversity as well is really important. And I guess a little while ago now, I started a standing calendar in our newsletter of important community events and celebrations that are important to the whole cross-section of our community. And that calendar's, you know, has become bigger from just a couple of small events here and there through to there's, you know, something almost every day that we're celebrating in our community. And we've got a little thing at the bottom of the calendar to say if there's something important that your family or your community celebrates that's not reflected in this calendar, let us know. So that's always being built on, and you know, it just helps us to understand just how diverse the population is and what, you know, different events and celebrations, what they mean to various sections of the community, and that way we can celebrate together as well and really acknowledge the diverse community that we do serve.
And I just love that quote you just said, that you've the open door policy, like you know, coming in, you're learning as well as a community, and people to come in and to say, hey, look, we'd love you to have this put in as a regards to for our diversity culture kind of celebrating. I love that. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
I hope everyone enjoyed that as well, as much as Hannah and I did.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. And
Thank you. And I can just say, if anyone's out there and wants to get in touch or, see anything else that we're doing at Dandenong Primary School, feel free. We're very open to, we love hearing from other people and hearing what they're up to as well. So thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and for being so accommodating and so open as well, and also for all of the wonderful work that you do for Dandenong's community. From this, I'm really encouraging educators out there now to think about some of the current practices that we're implementing in our classroom or in our learning community generally. The first thing, and I thought it was really interesting that we finished off talking to Daniel around pieces of advice and small pieces of advice. And I think the really powerful thing to take away from what Daniel said is just to start, is to get started somewhere if you're not already. I think one of the things, though, that I'd like to encourage educators to think about is that when we think about this huge topic of diversity, it can feel quite overwhelming. And so I want you to start out by thinking about the things that you already do. We know that there are things in your school that you may not be aware that you're doing, which are so inclusive of other communities or cultures or practices. So the first thing I'd really encourage you to do is to think about the things that you already do. Next thing is to think about some of the future practices that you might consider. And I'm thinking from today and from speaking to Daniel to think about whether there's anything there that you'd like to pinch, any ideas that you think work really well. I know that all of the communities across Australia will have their own different versions around what diversity looks like in their own communities, and so to think about what fits best for your community. We heard from Daniel as well about the importance of relationships, not just when we're going through something like COVID-19, but then just in the everyday, in that power for people to know the principal knows me, he's able to speak to me in my language, in whatever small part it may be, but to actually know that the principal is someone who's approachable, and to break down, I suppose, some of those ideas around principal as an authority figure as well, I think is really, really powerful. So when we think about deepening our practice, that can definitely be around connecting with families. And I love that idea, Yasmin, earlier where you said to talk about drawing your understanding or sharing your family. And I think that that's really important, that we don't come in with those biases that Daniel spoke about, that we don't make assumptions about what our family community groups look like. I think something that's really important as well is to think about how the voices of young people are heard. I really encourage you to start having a look through some of the BU resources. The BU website is a wonderful sort of gold mine, I suppose, so to speak, of resources that you can have a look at. And don't forget that there's also BU consultants across Australia who are able to work with your school or your early learning setting around what implementing BU in your own school or early learning centre. And finally, Daniel mentioned around Harmony Day, and I know that that's not the only celebration, but really celebrating difference, modelling to our young people that difference is something to be respected, to be curious about, and to be really inclusive of. So I really encourage you, first of all, when you think about your current practice and your future practice, celebrate the things you're doing now and be really excited about the possibilities. And don't forget that your BU journey and your journey on increasing inclusion in your community isn't something that you have to do by yourself. So when we talk about inclusive and welcoming steps in your community, something that I heard from another school that I work with in Victoria was this idea around a learning walk. It may seem small, but I love this idea about going and walking around your school community. It might be yourself, you might like to bring a parent or a carer or some young people, or maybe just you and some other staff members, and just be really curious. Walk around your school as if it's something that you haven't seen before. Where are those visual cues in your community that people are welcome, that they are included? Where are there things, for example, signposting around where to go to? Who can I get help from? What is there that's implicit in your school website that might have maybe some Harmony Day activities, or the contact for somebody like our Parent Resource Centre that Daniel was talking about. So really having a look, not a critical look, but just a curious look at your school and how it might be, what areas of inclusion you might look to include. And I love that idea from Daniel around listen, that it can be as simple and yet as powerful around just listen. We don't know what we don't know. I love that idea. So let's go to the polls. I'd love to hear from the audience at this stage. And also, while you're on there, if anybody has any questions that you might like to throw to Daniel as well, feel free. Also, there's a chat function if you'd like to put any questions in there around diversity and inclusion. But at the moment, you'll see a poll up on your screen. And our poll question, is I'd like you to have a bit of a think now after this session or during this session. Our poll statement is, I feel that I'm able to take some small steps to enhance inclusion in my learning community. And so you'll see there you can put down how you're feeling at the moment around enhancing inclusion. Is this something that you're raring to go? Is this something that you are keen to get started on, or is it something you're still feeling a bit unsure about at the moment? And I'm very pleased to say, very early, incredibly, over half of the people are voting that they feel very strongly that they are able to start enhancing inclusion in the learning community as well. Absolutely. So while we're having a look at this, and I'll just check if we have any questions as well. There's a question here, Daniel, about refugee communities in your school. How do you work specifically with your refugee communities?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on the needs of the community, of the particular communities, but often we will have refugee families who come into the school who may have experienced trauma. So one important thing that we need to look at is what mental health supports we can put in place for children and families. And we're lucky enough to have Foundation House just down the road from us in Dandenong, and that becomes a really powerful resource as far as meeting those mental health needs of those families. And I guess it just often, our refugee families might even be sort of struggling to put food on the table sometimes, so tapping into those different agencies in the local area who can provide food and material aid to those families is really important. And even things like working through, the bureaucracy, I guess, as far as enrolling in a school or working out how to get a healthcare card or any of those sorts of things. We almost sort of case manage families as well, and to provide them with as much support as we can. So and that's where the translators too are really critical at that point, because often the new arrivals have very limited English. There's some of the ways that we work to support the refugee families.
Excellent. Another question, I'm going to throw a few questions at you. Do you have any strategies for engaging with families who are not already involved in the school, so families that might have been a bit removed from the school?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's one of the more challenging things, I think, is tapping into those families who are really isolated or choose to be isolated or for whatever reason. So sometimes we might approach other members of the community and who we know might be friends of those families as well, just to find out if there's different ways that we can support them to feel welcome into the school. A lot of it too is through if we can engage the children and get them excited about coming into the school for different events. That's often a way to, get the families in for the first time, and then we sort of lavish them with our welcoming arms and let them know that we're here for them, and then we can start to find out what we can do to support them and to get them as engaged as possible. But it is challenging with the families who are, quite isolated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's try again, isn't it? It may not be the first time, but they know that door is open, don't they? That they're welcome when they're ready. Absolutely. What are some practical, respectful ways to include minorities within diverse communities?
practical.
Practical, respectful ways.
Yeah, I think learning to say hello in their language is is quite a practical way, and because it just demonstrates that you value their language and culture. So I think that's a bit of a first step. And I guess finding ways where you can build connections between that particular family and maybe other families as well. And if it is a small minority, that can be challenging because there might only be a couple of families from a particular culture or part of the world, but just finding whatever way that you can to sort of show them that you're going to celebrate their culture is really important. And it could be as simple as we use social media quite a lot, so Facebook and Instagram, and if there's particular events that are coming up that might be important for one particular culture, even though it might be quite a small culture within the school, we still make sure we celebrate that as much as we would with the more mainstream sort of families or cultures in the school as well.
And I think every time that you show that you're flexible and willing to be adaptable as well. I was thinking about when I was teaching and we had a big Harmony Day celebration, and we had in secondary school, sometimes some of you may know parents and carers may be a bit more removed from being involved in the day-to-day activities at a school when you're dealing with teenagers. But we had a parent from the Sikh community who was very, very keen to be part of our food stalls, and it was just around negotiating or making sure that he felt comfortable that he wanted to be on the food stalls that were vegetarian because that was aligning with his cultural values. And so even just something, a very small step around being flexible and responsive and respectful to their needs, I think that's something just small and very powerful that you can do as well. Just a question about ways to be inclusive of families and children with disabilities. Would you do something similar as you've described previously around listening, being inclusive? Anything particularly to add?
No, I think the key thing there is listening and finding out, well, what outcomes would they like from their participation in the school and community. We've had children with disabilities in the school that we've sort of had to work out different ways to meet their needs, whether it's sort of physical disabilities or otherwise. So, I think the main thing is listening and finding out, well, what's going to be key to them being engaged as much as possible in the community.
Absolutely. I think another one definitely is around pre-preparation, I suppose, if you will. So for myself, transition to high school can be very can be a bit tricky for some families, whether or not they have a young person with a disability or not. And so for myself, one of the things that was really helpful was around inviting young people in prior to the start of the school year. And that might be around negotiating with the families about a classroom that might be best placed for the young person, whether that's desk placement, equipment, changes to lockers, all those sorts of things that might be needed. I'll share with you both. One of the really powerful things for me was when I was teaching a young blind girl who was making her transition into secondary school. And one of the first things that, and this has always stayed with me, was I spoke to her mum and I said, what is it that you would like this young person to get out of her high school experience? And the thing that she wanted was for her young person to be independent, because she knew that in a few years this young person would be out in the job market, she would be an independent young person who would be going to the movies or would be going, shopping with her friends. And so for her, it was about independence. And so my preconceived ideas around what she might have wanted were very different, and it was really important to listen as well. Okay, so thank you so much. I will do a final check of our polling results. I am so pleased to say that the overwhelming majority feel that they can do something now, a small step to enhance inclusion in their learning community. I think that is something that we need to congratulate ourselves on as educators, that we feel there's something that we can do, that we're empowered, because I think it's really important that we feel we can take a step from here. So, BU, what is there that we can look at to help increase our knowledge of diversity? I really encourage you, first of all, to be really curious about the BU website. There's a lot on there, and I encourage you to have a bit of a play, have a look around. There's a wonderful search function on it as well. So there's some, in the middle we have mentally healthy communities domain. And you can see that there's an include module, and that's really about embracing diversity in your community. And Daniel, I think your video might even feature there. So some of the things you can see in there are the principles around inclusion, so the core principles. There's also some really great things there around attitudes and barriers to diversity, and that might include things such as discrimination, racism, and how we can do things to combat those. There's also discussion around diversity of experience, and I think some of the questions we've had today talking about a wider range of inclusion around disability is part of that, and it's really awesome. And then, like Daniel's example, there's some other really wonderful examples of inclusive schools across Australia. So, wrapping up, there's a lot to look at on the BU domain, on the BU website. I really encourage you to register for BU at bu.edu.au. I also encourage you, if you're a social media person, to get onto Instagram, Twitter or Facebook and follow BU there. It is a really good chance on the social media channels to have a look and see what other schools are doing. There's some really wonderful up-to-date stories and resources. And I also encourage you, on the BU website, there is an events page where, like our session today, there are a number of professional learning sessions as well on a range of different topics for both schools and early learning services. And don't forget as well that you have a BU consultant who is there to stay alongside you, to walk that journey with you. And also, because the consultants work with a wide range of schools, they work with schools where they might be able to share ideas and really help guide you on that journey. So a couple of things to finish off. Please take time to reflect on the quick wins in your community, those things that you're already doing. I encourage you to talk among your team of other teachers or educators around your goals for the future, for what you would like to achieve. Think big picture, but then also start with taking one small step. I know it's the end of a very long term, so you might like to spend some time now thinking about what term 2 might look like for you. And don't forget, the website and the consultants are there for you and help support you. I wanted to say a massive thank you to Daniel Riley from Dandenong Primary School. And really, I know this is the end of a really long term and a very busy past year and a bit, I think. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And on behalf of Yasmin and myself, thank you very much for being part. And Daniel, to take inspiration from you, I'm conscious that over the coming holidays, there are people in the community who are celebrating not only Easter, but also Passover and Howley. So I wish all those people very wonderful festivals. Thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.